You know, many of you are fat, and you feel guilty about it. But what if being fat really isn't your fault? Well, Dr. Barry Sears, the creator of the very well-known Zone diet, says obesity is a form of cancer, and it's triggered by inflammation from the foods we eat. Watch this.
It seems like almost everyone in America is battling some level of fat. But there's a type of fat that doesn't respond to eating less and exercising more. And it's toxic. The good news is that Dr. Barry Sears says he has a way to reverse high levels of toxic fat in less than 30 days. Dr. Sears explains why lean bodies don't always mean healthy bodies and tells you what to do when good fat turns bad.
This is a provocative book. It's called Toxic Fat. Listen to this. Some extra body fat can be good. Lean doesn't mean healthy always. Eating less, exercising more may not work. Obesity is a cancer. Wow! Dr. Barry Sears is with us. Good to see you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. You scored a real hit with the Zone diet. Now you've got toxic fat. Tell me, what is it? Why is it toxic?
Well, it is toxic because in high levels, it basically will cause inflammation throughout the body.
All right.
Perhaps the short answer is, if you have high levels of toxic fat, it'll make you fatter,
all right,
dumber, and sicker.
Fatter, dumber, and sicker? Well, at what point, you've said maybe fat isn't your fault. I mean, how do you get that way?
Well, it turns out that for people who are overweight, fat, there really is not their fault. They're meant to believe that they're morally inferior. Mm-hmm. But in reality, it's their genes which are causing the obesity and now being activated by relatively recent changes in the American diet.
What are the recent changes?
Two things. It's what I call the perfect nutritional storm.
All right.
The first is increased consumption of refined carbohydrates.
Okay.
Yes, that's junk food, but it's also bread, pizza, and pasta. That's not sufficient. The second is basically now an increase in omega-6 fatty acids. Where do these come from? Vegetable oils, which are now ubiquitous.
They're bad?
They're bad.
Oh.
Not by themselves, but when they combine with a high carbohydrate diet, now they basically are potent mixtures, like adding kerosene to a fire, and now you get increased levels of toxic fat.
Incredible. And toxic fat can bring you cancer? It is cancer.
Well, it really is a cancer. And this is what we think, well, if I'm not fat, I have no toxic fat flowing through my blood. Nothing could be further from the truth. The fact is, you cannot look at a person and tell their levels of toxic fat. But there are certain blood tests which we've done, and unfortunately, about 90% of Americans have high levels of toxic fat.
What are the blood tests?
Well, the blood test is ones used in experimental, venues. But again, there are also many subjective aspects. You can ask yourself and say, is this an indication I have high levels of toxic fat in my body?
Well, what's this whole thing about inflammation? People have talked about inflammation as being sort of like the root cause of everything.
Well, it really is. It's a root cause of all chronic disease. There's two types of inflammation. Okay. The types that hurts.
All right.
That's why you see a doctor.
All right.
But now we know there's a second type, the type that's below the perception of pain. This has no pain, and therefore you don't see a doctor. But as a consequence, it keeps attacking your organs for years, if not decades, until there's enough in-organ damage. We call it heart disease, cancer, or Alzheimer's.
Metabolic syndrome, is that what you call it, or is that metabolic? What is metabolic?
Well, metabolic syndrome is the first indication that you already have toxic fat syndrome.
Okay.
And this is basically when you basically get a large belly, your triglycerides rise, your HDL cholesterol levels low. It's basically a warning sign that if you don't turn back the tide, bad things are going to happen.
Okay, how do people take control of this? I mean, it sounds like it's sort of you're programmed into your genes and maybe it's destiny and all the rest. Well, how do you get hold of it?
Well, you can't change your genes, but you can change their expression.
Okay.
And how? It starts right in the kitchen. And everything your grandmother told you 2 generations ago is exactly how you control toxic fat.
What did grandmother tell us?
She told you 4 things.
All right.
The first thing, you eat small meals throughout the day.
Okay.
The second thing, you have some protein with every meal.
All right.
The third thing, you always eat your vegetables. Remember, you can't leave the table until you eat your vegetables?
Oh, yes, yes.
And the last thing your grandmother told you, you have to take your fish oil.
That's right, cod liver oil. Please, no, I can't stand it.
Most disgusting food known to man. But she was at the cutting edge of 21st century biotechnology, saying, this is exactly how you keep toxic fat under control.
Well, how does that oil work?
Well, the oil works because it contains a different type of fat called omega-3 fats.
Okay.
And at high enough levels, these are profound anti-inflammatory agents, whereas the omega-6 are pro-inflammatory. So if I take enough fish oil, I can begin to dilute out toxic fat.
Incredible. Well, is it just fish oil, or what about flaxseed and vegetable sources?
Well, flaxseed oil or vegetable sources contain short-chain omega-3 fatty acids, which are very inefficiently and very poorly converted to the long-chain ones that do all the heavy lifting.
Can you do this with pills, or should it be a liquid?
Well, again, pills are more convenient, and it depends on the levels of toxic fat.
Yeah.
If you have higher levels, you'll need higher levels of fish oil, and now the liquid becomes easier to take than pills.
Okay. Well, now, what about this business of eating less, exercising may not work?
Well, that's what we've told. Say, if you only would eat less and exercise more, you'll lose all the weight. Unfortunately, that doesn't work. People who are overweight, they have what I call as a fat trap. Obviously, the calories go in the mouth, but they get trapped in their fat tissues. And literally, they are starving. And when they eat less, they'll starve more. When they begin to exercise more, they'll starve more. And so basically what happens, they can't access their fat, but they start cannibalizing their own tissue.
Good heavens.
And basically this is why they see a weight drop and they say, wait a minute, this is stupid. And they go back to their natural level. So the fact is, unless you relieve the underlying cause of obesity, the inflammation, basically, you'll never be successful telling people to eat less and exercise more.
Let's get down precisely. I want people's ears are perked. First of all, fish oil. You've got some sample Omega RX. This is from the Zone. This is a fish oil. And is that enough to take fish oil?
Well, what fish oil will do is basically dilute out the toxic fat.
Okay.
So if you have only 15 seconds a day to get better health, then take as much fish oil as you can in 15 seconds and call it a day. Now, if you really want to address the toxic fat, then you have to watch your diet and follow exactly what your grandmother told you. You eat lots of colorful vegetables.
Okay.
You eat small amounts of protein and small meals throughout the day.
That's it.
And the last thing, why you eat the vegetables? Because they're colored. Here's a good rule of thumb. Eat only carbohydrates which are colored. They contain chemicals called polyphenols.
Yes.
And those polyphenols, in high enough levels, have an anti-inflammatory response.
Incredible. So the Lord put all this stuff here for us, and grandmother needed to see it.
Exactly. And that's why this going back to first principles, saying, yes, basically she knew exactly what she was talking about.
Well, what about cakes and pies and pizzas and spaghetti and all that other
Well,
pasta?
people are going to eat those, but treat them like condiments.
Okay.
And basically, when you had your birthday cake today for CBN, say, are you going to eat the whole cake? Probably not. A small amount, it'll taste just as good.
Sure.
But as Chrissy said, have a protein chaser with it.
You're really a protein chaser?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. This is very interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, Toxic Fat. Where do you get this book? Is it everywhere, I guess?
It's everywhere. Actually, it's the first day it's introduced throughout America.
Wonderful. Well, ladies and gentlemen, rush out and get your copy, because Dr. Sears has got some really intriguing things for you. Toxic Fat. And these are some pills that he's...
Well, those are the polyphenols, basically the concentrated fruits and vegetables.
These are polyphenols, so you can get your vegetable in a bottle as well as the...
That's assuming you're too lazy not to do it in the kitchen.
Yeah, right. It's kind of tough for some ladies. Barry, thank you so much for being
Thank you. It's always my pleasure.
My pleasure. Barry Sears, ladies and gentlemen. Very fascinating.